Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special Board of Supervisors meeting on May 28th, 2013. Can we all rise for the pledge?
Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for a certificate of posting?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll go to closed session. County Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors will now adjourn into closed session to discuss agenda item number 1 on today's agenda. That agenda item is to meet and confer with its labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Allison Hauk, Georgia Cochran, Dania Torres-Wong, David Turner, Ray Espinoza, and Joe Paul Gonzalez. The employee organizations involved are the Management Employees Group, the Institutions Association, SEIU Local 521, the General Unit Employees, the Deputy Sheriff Association, and the Law Enforcement Management. Authority for this closed session is found in California Government Code Section 54957.6.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Jerry. I'll let you have your turn in a real meeting.
You're the chair. I ain't gonna.
I feel better now.
County Council, what we'll do is we'll report out and then take a 5-minute break. I know a lot of you folks are here, but we've been in closed session the entire time, and with that 5-minute break, we'll catch our breaths, but we'll report out first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors met in closed session to discuss agenda item number 1 on today's agenda. The Board conferred with its labor negotiators and the agency designated representatives, Allison Hauk, Georgia Cochran, Dania Torres-Wong, Dave Turner, Ray Espinoza, and Joe Paul Gonzalez. The employee organizations involved were the Management Employees Group, Institutions Association, SEI Local 521, the General Unit Employees, Deputy Sheriff's Association, and the Law Enforcement Management. Authority for this closed session is found in California Government Code Section 54957.6. At this time, the Board took no reportable action.
Thank you. And with that, we'll take a 5-minute break. And we'll
She still wants to meet. I'm there saying, my letter, and she wants to meet. She thinks we could probably get out some business. Without having to work before.
So we drove. We decided. I decided to take a
I'm going to one car.
You did? Okay. All right. I'll put some in the back.
The weird stuff? It's like my CWDA. Make sure we have she gets the agenda. She submits her expenditure. In 1 hour? That would be nice.
Finally, I'll be in a 10-year
So why are we banning cattle in the new general plan? Where did it say that? Oh, the greenhouse. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I imagine, where's Supervisor Joe Cruz?
He was in the back a minute ago.
Hey.
You might be out there talking to somebody.
I didn't see him out there.
Ray.
You should see the plan.
I'm just waiting for Supervisor De La Cruz.
Very close. Very, very close. I know.
As far as you know the information.
He's pretty. But you can read it line by line, which is good.
Okay, I'll call a meeting back to order for our regular agenda. CEO Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this year is the first year that we're actually coming to your board in advance of the budget hearings. But what we wanted to do is present to your board a very close to proposed recommended budget to you in advance for your review. So we're doing that today, and what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay out kind of the ground rules and kind of give you an overview of what we're wanting to achieve today. Basically, what we're looking at doing is basically a dry rehearsal today. We're not going to ask any of the departments to come up unless your board has a question that maybe is really alarming, a big question that you may have, feel free. But Melinda's going to be here. She's our Management Analyst 3 that's helped us prepare this budget, along with the auditing department and the administration. We could probably answer your questions, but if there's anything that's blatant that comes out, we're going to request, we obviously have the department heads as well as their analyst here to answer any questions. In addition to that is, what I like to do is share with you a few housekeeping as well. If you'd like to go ahead and go to page 6 of the packet, the agenda packet that you have, you're going to see budget hearing, June 17, 2013, and Melinda has it on the board for those that may not have the entire packet with you. In this particular case, we're going to be outlining what we're going to do during the June 17th budget hearings. And again, the reason why we wanted to bring this to your attention is that there's going to be some changes. We're going to have items that are going to be on consent that we have not had in the past. So we want to make sure that you're aware of it and logistically how to handle those things. As you move down and scroll down, there's going to be next page, which is 7 of the 257 pages here. There's introductions and opening remarks, County Administrative Officer, and recommended budget. These particular items I'm going to kind of highlight for you. We're going to go through a summary, which is the actual, both of those items are summaries, which we have not had in years past. And in this case, I just want to make sure you're aware, during the June 17th hearing, it's going to be a little bit different. You're not going to have a similar summary, but you're going to have actually the schedules or a summary of how we actually achieved the budget, which has been requested, I think, of your board years past. So this year we're going to actually have that for you. The other thing is today I want to make sure you're aware is that we have most of the numbers in here. We don't have all the narratives. We don't have a few other things, but we wanted to get this to your board in advance, really the core components of the budget, which you do have before you. So if go ahead and take a look at the recommended budget. So go ahead and go up a little bit, Melinda, page 7, and you'll see the fiscal year 2013-2014 recommended budget. It's highlighted. We'll go ahead and click on that. And in here, basically kind of gives you an overview of how we achieved our budget. It's a balanced budget by line item. And in here, we actually have, the other funds, which make up subvented groups, as well as general fund, and then the overall county budget here. Salaries and benefits. What we've wanted to do this year as well, actually, can you click on the plus sign to make it a little larger so people can see it in the audience, Melinda, on the left-hand side? Yeah, no. There you go, the percentage. There you go. Now, this right here, one of the things I wanted to highlight for you was Melinda was able to actually put percentages. I think we've mentioned this before in the past special board meetings, but we were actually able to put percentages attached to the budget this year, or at least in the summary here. And Melinda was kind enough to hand out a pie chart, if you will. It should be on your desk. There's some in the back if anybody wants to receive any. Reviewing with us the percentages, and I wanted to share with you this because I think it kind of really enlightens us a little bit to regards to where our impacts are, especially on the salaries and benefits section of the budget. And if you look at the general fund, we actually have our salaries at 61%. Now keep in mind, these percentages in this pie chart, or in these pie chart, is represented just in the salaries and benefits section, so it's 100%. When you look at the recommended budget by fund that Melinda just had on the board a few minutes ago, and it shows all the percentages, that's based off of the percentages for each one off the entire budget. So the numbers are going to be a little bit different. Just keep that in mind. But at least the ratios, you'll be able to understand the importance of the percentages. So going back to the pie chart, what I wanted to share with you is the general fund. We have OPEB charges 4%, PERS charges, PERS, which is 15%, and group insurance, which is 9%. If you turn the page to all other groups, salaries and benefits, you'll see OPEB charges 12%, PERS 12%, and group insurance 12%. And you're going to probably ask the question, well, why is it a little less on the general fund? Well, it was because of a prior special board meeting that your board actually approved the 2A that Joe Paul Gonzalez, our auditor, presented about the OPEB. So we're actually paying less on the general fund side. We're not paying the full burden on the general fund side. So that's the reason why. So the overall on the last page gives you kind of an overall of the OPEB, which is 8%, 13% on PERS, and group insurance 11%. So when you look at these numbers really kind of stand out, kind of jump out, and want to make sure that you're aware that, you know, these are the things that we need to start addressing for stability within the county over the next few years. And I want to make sure that you saw that from a percentage base. Going back to the packet on page 12, under the recommended budget by fund, as you can see, all of these items are by general fund. On the bottom here, I wanted to share with you, just now this is more of a housekeeping item, department list. And this, yeah, the department list actually in the bottom there, just so you're aware of it, will take you back up to the top of the page. So when you click on that button, it'll take you back up, because this is something new. I think most of the time, I think in past budget hearings, you've had the actual binders. So I want to make sure you're aware and comfortable with the software and with the computer itself. On this page here, it shows the revenues, the use of fund balance, general fund contribution, total source of funds, and balance expenditures there. As we continue on to the next page, on page 13 of our packet, you're going to see the fund numbers, the budget unit numbers, the descriptions of each department, total salaries and benefits, services and supplies, other charges, cost applied, fixed assets, general fund cost plan, which is a new item that we've added, gross cost, well, for some fund units, less financing sources, as well as net county cost. So there have been some changes. There are some additions of employees. There was actually, let me just kind of take a step back there. Last year there was a reduction with layoffs at this same time last year. And we've reduced down to about 371 or so employees. And with this budget, we're proposing to add a few where needed. There's some key positions that we really need to add a few more positions. We've also allocated some more funding for some of the funds. But to be quite honest with you, we're really status quo from last year. Almost all the funds are for the most part status quo, with the exception of a few, which Melinda is going to highlight. So we're going to highlight some of those changes within the consent items. So we're going to kind of highlight those. Normally, on the June 17th meeting, we're not going to, unless you request to pull an item, but we're not going to highlight any of those changes then. But we'd like to highlight those today for your for you. So as you continue down here on page 14 and 15, you actually will go to page 15. You'll see appropriations of contingencies. There's another item here that that we have added, which is well, not really added, but we've increased, was the contingencies. Last year we only had $200,000 of contingencies. This year we're allocating $681,237 for contingencies. And again, we really want to keep your board apprised of this, is that this is really for an emergency. If someone leaves or retires and we didn't account for it, which we've done our due diligence on that. We've met with the department heads. But again, we just never know when that may occur. So that's what those funds are really used for, or meant to be used for. And as you can see here, we have under totals on the very bottom right-hand side, there's just a a blank there, that means it's showing 0. So in essence, what we've done is we've balanced this budget. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this with no furloughs, allowing step increases. However, with concessions, there being some concessions, we've used the $1.6 million MOE that we had from our Health and Human Services Department that we're moving over, so that's part of that balance. With a $1 million rollover that's anticipated by the auditor. Auditor said that that's a fair number to use for rolling over. And the $681,000 in contingencies. Again, we've added a few employees where needed. And again, Melinda is going to be highlighting those items of change for each department. So what I like to do here is kind of go through the items that we've changed or any questions that you have as we move on. So go to page 5, and the remaining part of the summary is the Savannah Group. And then we're going to go to the recommended, but actually let's just go to the department list, go back up to the top.
Oh, it's in very top.
Just go back up to the top. There you go. So this is going to be this is part of the agenda when we actually come into the budget hearings. It's just going to be like a regular board meeting. This will be on consent. But we're going to go ahead today is just go ahead and highlight these items for you. Again, they're highlighted now. You know, they're linked. Each one of them are linked into the actual budget itself. So when you click on any one of these items, it'll take it to the actual expenses, revenues, and so on and so forth. So Melinda, do you want to go ahead and take this on?
Okay. Okay, so bear with me a little bit. I have a couple of different pages here, but basically I'm going to go down through all the consent agenda items, and if there's anything that we feel needs to be pointed out to you, we'll go ahead and go through that department a little bit. So item number 1 is general fund contributions, and that particular budget is obviously funds that we use to support other agencies or other funds, general fund contributions. And then the rest of these items are basically funding for sources that we feel pertain to specifically for this year, not necessarily for every year, that don't necessarily belong in a certain department. There's things like A87 cost, the cost plan, the county audit, and so that's what the items are in this particular budget unit. The general purpose non-departmental revenues are things like taxes, use of taxes, franchise fees. So those are things that we feel are particular, that will cover all of the general fund departments. And basically there's not much change in general purpose in the non-departmental revenues. Item number 3, the grand jury, that's doesn't have any change this year. Number 4, communications doesn't have any change. Item number 5, UNET doesn't have any change. Number 6, the sheriff's rural grants doesn't have any change. Item number 7, gang prevention, there's no change. And item number 8, the coroner doesn't have any change. Public administrator doesn't have any change associated with it. Housing and economic development doesn't. Abandoned vehicles. That's land development, council of governments, county CMSP doesn't. General relief to aid to indigents doesn't. First 5 doesn't. Veteran Services doesn't. University of California, that does have a change associated with it this year. The advisor requested a part-time person, and we felt it was better to perhaps put some money in their special departmental expense that would cover a half-time person. However, it would not be a county person. They would hire this person through the UC Cooperative Extensions category, and we funded some money for them to hire a part-time person.
Mr. Chair.
1 second, Melinda.
So
Do you want to look at that one?
the UC extent, they're okay with that?
I believe she.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They would
I see
hire
AOS.
the person through their system.
Yeah, we've
not
actually
ours.
met with with the UC Extension, and that was one of the things we were trying to figure out what we can do. With each department, we've been looking at different ways to either help or basically assist them in one way or another. And one of the things was being able to do what we're doing here is give them a little bit of money, and they're going to bring that person within the organization, and they're fine with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Melinda.
Okay. Long-term debt repayment, that's the repayment for the sheriff's building. That doesn't have any change. Public Works, road maintenance, and CSA internal services fund. There's a slight change in the way that they accounted for their their full-time people. So there's a change, not necessarily in the budget, but they felt they made a change in where they categorized some of their employees that they felt was better, that showed a better use of how the employees are actually their work's actually being done. So they have quite a few budget units. They have maintenance, public works, the CSA internal services, their capital improvements. Anyways, they changed some people around a little bit just to better classify how their work's being done. Victim witness was the same. Child support services is the same. Mental health and substance abuse are the same. Some of these subvented groups are going to come back. We're going to come back with some changes to the numbers just because we haven't finalized all the numbers exactly. But overall, there's not going to be a cost to the general fund. So you might see a slight change in some of their funding when we come back on June 17th. The Public Health Summary Fund, underneath it you'll see a bunch of different programs, but for today's budget we just presented everything as a total in Public Health Summary and did not provide you with the individual departments or programs. Emergency Medical Services, number 37 was the same.
Mr. Chair?
Number 38, Human.
1 second.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight that under public health, just so you're aware. That was just for a summary for today, but we will have each one for the budget hearing on June 17th. Just make sure you're aware of that.
Human Services Agency, they've requested an additional 6 full-time employees. I'm sorry, 4. From last year's budget to this year's budget, there's an addition of 10, but 10 full-time employees, but they've already received most of those, and they through agenda items that have previously occurred, and they've requested 4 more additional employees with this budget. Again, their revenues and their expenditure, whatever their expenditures are, they will cover that with their revenues. And then number 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, and 44, those are just different programs within the Human Services Agency. Those are separate programs, but basically their revenue covers their expenditures. Number 45, Public Authority, there wasn't any change. 46, CSWD didn't have any changes. 47, Migrant didn't have any changes. 48, Fish and Game didn't have any changes. 49, Mosquito Abatement didn't have any changes. And then 50 and 51, Integrated Waste Management and Regional Agency didn't have any changes. Any questions or any budget units you'd like to review? look at.
And this is just the consent
Okay.
area, consent item.
All right. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I just need to go back to it. On page 68, Melinda, that is the summary of everything that you just went through on the consent, right?
I'm sorry, on
On
what page?
page 68 is the summary.
Page 68.
Now, if we look at 2012-13, our expenditures are up 136.1%.
Can you turn your mic on?
Page 68 on the budget packet.
Yes, page 68. Is that better? Okay.
Which page are you
okay.
on, Supervisor Barrio?
Page 68.
68.
Okay.
If we look at page 68, because you were saying that there wasn't a significant change, but if I look at the totals on the bottom from prior budget year to this budget year, it looks like there's a significant change, but maybe if you could explain that to me.
Okay. The biggest change would be the retirement, the line item that says retirement benefit for GASB. In that budget unit, I believe a couple of meetings ago, Joe Paul came up here and explained that we wanted to charge the general funds $5,000 per FTE and OPEB, but we were going to charge the subvented groups $12,000, and so the difference,
so
the
that is,
$7,000.
it's showing the difference.
That's where we're showing
Okay.
that difference right
So
there.
it wasn't really, and I think he said that it was really going from one pocket into another.
Right.
Really, but it's just
Right.
for the numbers to show.
But for the accounting purposes, we need to show,
Actually-
we need to budget it somewhere.
And that was the most significant change then for the bottom line.
Actually, this is
Well, in that specific instance, that's where we had a kind of a strategy where if, as you recall, if we were successful in our ERAF legislation,
Right.
that it would free up restricted reserves, and those monies would be unrestricted to cover the difference between the 12,000 this year and the 5,000 that we're actually paying in each budget unit. That's where that money was put in there. So when the next iteration of the proposed budget comes out, that's probably going to be out of there.
Okay, so then the bottom line, when we look at adopted 1213 for expenditures, and then we look at the bottom line recommended for 1314, then we're looking, that would be the biggest difference. That's all I wanted to make sure that we were clear on. Okay, because you were talking about there
That
were
is-
not major changes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that is the, but again, it was a contingent type of expenditure, but, you know, we know now that it's not going to be made.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor De La Cruz?
on that item, I see here that 211 system, we have $5,000 set aside. We haven't made a decision to go in that direction. You're just bringing a recommendation to the board, right?
We're budgeting for that. I've already met with the sheriff, our behavior health director, as well as our health and human services interim director, and they're on board to help subsidize that. So, again, this was part of the budget process, and we were budgeting for that. But most of the obligation that we're going to be putting the 211 is going to be from the subvented funds. We may put $1,000 or $1,200 from the general fund, but it'd be very minimal. It's not going to be the entire $5,000.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about? So basically, what we're looking at is kind of a preliminary budget at this point in time. Some numbers could change depending on how
Yes.
they're reconciled from this point to the budget hearings going forward. The biggest changes is this budget is balanced, that we're eliminating furloughs and implementing some step increases.
Correct.
But all in all, the staffing levels, for the most part, in most departments are relatively the same. and that the contingency, rather than 200,000 as we had it last year, is to be somewhere in the neighborhood, it being proposed right now at 681,000.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is it appropriate, I had a thought on the contingency rather, and I've talked to the CEO about it previously, and maybe for the benefit, if I recall, last year, in order to us to get to our balanced budget utilizing some reserves, we ended up going to public safety for 200,000, if you recall that. If we don't direct that, a contingency fund be at 500,000, and then maybe allow the CAO to work with our public safety departments to see if that 181,000 should be shifted back in that direction.
If you don't mind me, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Right now we've only covered the consent items. I'd like to kind of go through a little bit more, because I know that there's some more items that Melinda would like to cover on the general fund side. That she can talk a little bit more about the safety and what we've done as well. We've added a little bit more funding for overtime in there, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific with regards to that, so that way your board's aware, and then we can come back to that if you'd like.
Okay, because that's something I would like to come back to and talk about, but that makes sense. Okay.
Okay,
Ms. Costello.
so basically, I just wanted to point out, this is going to be the consent agenda, and these are the departments that are going to be on the consent agenda. Most of them are subvented funds, and there may be some changes a little bit here or there between now and the June 17th budget. However, I did want to stress that the expenditures of those budget units will be covered by their revenue. And then I tried to highlight the kind of the major changes in any of those budgets. And then we'll go on to the public hearing after the consent agenda, in which we'll cover the capital outlay fund, the road projects items. And then we don't have it on here, but I have talked to Public Works, and we're going to also add in the CSA budgets, so we make sure we get all of those adopted at the same time. And then we're going to move on to the regular agenda. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing. If there's been changes in specific departments, major changes or new items, then I'll also go over those. So like number 54, Board of Supervisors doesn't have any change from last year. Clerk of the Board doesn't have any change. The County Administrative Office has some changes. They've basically added 1.3 FTEs. We felt that it was necessary to increase the FTEs in that department, because basically right now the budget was put together on temporary help. And so we felt kind of strongly that that department needed a little bit more support. The next three budget units, number 57, 58, 59, internal services, risk management, and then risk, ISF. I want to take those kind of all together. We've kind of combined risk management and internal services and created a new internal service fund that we're going to, for now, call RISK. That's going to incorporate workers' comp and general liability, and it's basically an accounting change in the way that we're going to be handling those particular items. And so we've kind of combined and taken out a little bit of the program into the internal services fund. And I don't believe there were any positions added to that. They're just going to be accounted a little bit differently. Number 60, information technology has one additional FTE that's going to be paid for. It's going to be specifically dedicated to HSA and behavioral health, and so they're going to pay for that additional FTE. Number 61, GIS, has no changes in it. Number 62, County Council, has a small change. They have an additional 0.1 FTE. They're going to increase one of their deputy county council attorneys from a 0.7 to a 0.8, I believe, or a 0.8 to a 0.9. And that position is actually paid for by HSA. So they're going to cover the additional increase in that person. Number 63, the treasurer doesn't have any change. Number 64, the tax collector has a half-time, they had a half-time accounting technician that we're going to move up to one full-time employee. And then in talking to the treasurer tax collector, there's a backlog of quite a bit of unsecured, of outstanding property taxes, and we're going to be using that person to reduce the backlog. And so that's a half employee to manage that. The assessor, number 65, we basically doubled his temporary help. He also has a backlog, and we felt that by giving him additional temporary help, a couple of additional temporary help employees, that could also make a difference in his workload.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Oh, sure.
Melinda, with that one, I did notice you were on the assessor, right?
Uh-huh.
The last one, that there was a net county cost, and also the tax collector right before, with a net county cost of additional amounts. So that would be as a result of the additional temporary help, but with the idea that we would be bringing more revenue to the county.
Right.
By having those people in place, because of the backlog, would bring these dollars.
Right.
Into our coffers quicker.
Oh, correct.
Bringing them, period, because we may not collect them if we don't get somebody to get on these
Right.
immediately.
Right.
So,
You know, I should have also pointed out, if you're looking at net county cost, because we didn't necessarily put together this budget based upon last year's net county cost and this year's. But for example, let's go to the assessor.
and that's page 50?
That is page 50 of your budget packet. If you click on the assessor, it should take you right there. At the bottom here, you'll see a line item that's called A87 cost plan changes at the bottom, and on the assessors, that shows $250,000. This year, per the auditor's request, we've included currently, general fund departments do not pay their share of the cost plan. Only subvented groups pay into the cost plan, because really there isn't any revenue that we can collect to pay for that. But this year we're showing the cost that they would be charged where they where they pay into the cost plan, and these are, and under the cost plan, the auditor, the CAO, Human Services, would be their charge for their services. We've also, on the other hand, so where we have charges in the departments, the general fund departments this year, we've got a total of about $2.5 million. On the other hand, in the general revenue, you'll see the exact amount in revenue. It's just taking money out of one pocket and putting it in another, basically. But we felt it was important information to see how much each different department requires the support services of those overhead departments.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, then back to my question, then the 268, for instance, on the assessor's net counting cost, additional 200, is really not all related to temporary help.
No.
And neither is the tax collectors. It's, most of it is the A87 cost
Right,
plan.
right.
And that explains the bottom line for your summary of the amount of
Right.
additional net county costs.
So you're going to see some of them are quite a bit larger
They are,
than
yeah.
they were. So in putting together this year's budget, we basically did not look at the net county costs from last year to this year because there were just so many different factors involved in why that was increased. So what I'm trying to show you here is items that are specifically increased over last year's budget, but not, we don't want to make the A87 to be an issue.
Right, okay. Well, it won't be, because now that I see that most of the departments that are showing additional increase, or an increase to net county costs, a lot of that, most of it is the result of the A87 plan.
Right,
Okay,
right.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And most of the departments were status quo on employees and services and supplies. So I think that you would find most of the changes have to do with the salary and benefits. We've taken out the furloughs. There's not, we did this budget based on no more furloughs, no more step freezes. So those costs are already, so we had to add those costs to salary and supplies. So, salary and benefits. So I think you'll see salary and benefits have kind of gone, you'll see most of the changes in those line items. Okay, so back to, on the assessor. On the clerk, auditor, recorder, let's take the auditor separately. The auditor, we have increased their FTEs by 2.45. Most of that has to do with accountants, because the auditor's office currently doesn't have any accountants. And we felt that it was important for the auditor's office to have accountants having to rely upon the assistant auditor to do most of the accounting, reporting, and functions. And we felt that this department needed a little bit of additional help this year. The clerk, recorder, and elections, there were some changes, and essentially they had approximately 3 new full-time employees between elections, clerk, and recorder, and those are basically offset, offset by revenue. A couple meetings ago, Joe Paul came with a new fee schedule that basically increased his revenue quite substantially, and so he was able to cover adding 3 additional full-time employees to those budgets that were basically offset by revenue. Number 70, the district attorney didn't have any additional or requests or changes. Number 71, the public defender, the same contract as last year. Item 72, and the sheriff's budget, we increased their overtime salaries by $50,000. We felt that better accurately reflected their true overtime costs, but no additional personnel. And then in item number 73 at the jail, I believe their overtime was increased approximately $100,000 to better reflect the overtime that's occurring in the jail. No additional personnel. Number 74, Office of Emergency Services, there wasn't any change. Item 75 and 76, no additional requests in those departments. Item number 76 and item number 77 kind of go hand in hand. Item 76, we'll take a look at that one. Buildings and grounds maintenance. We have separated out, there used to be under 6237 utilities, that all shows zeros right now. We separated out per the board of direction, I'm sorry, I don't remember, a couple months ago, I think. We now have the following. We set up a countywide utilities, and we've separated out all the utilities into its own budget unit this year. And you will see that line item utilities in budget number 165 on page 71 of the budget packet. I was just taking out utilities from one budget unit and putting it into another budget unit. And I believe they might have changed, I think they took out a 1.5 FTE, and they changed that, went around to another one of their departments that they have. Okay, let's see. Take it back to the top. Public Works Administration and Engineering. Again, they moved some people around, and there was one employee that was at a 0.8, and that's been budgeted for a full-time employee now. Item number 79 and 80, the parks, basically the same kind of thing, as there were some people that were moved around in those departments. I think they were taken out, but let me check. Yeah, there was just some movement of personnel within those departments. Item number 81, Agricultural Commissioner. There's not any change or new requests in there. 82, Planning and Building is the same as basically as last year. 83, Animal Control. Animal Control has a slight change due to some board direction within the last couple of months. They will now be, they can now give citations, I believe. That's the change. Anyways, there's $10,000 worth of revenue associated with that budget now, which there hasn't been any revenue associated prior to this year. County Fire. We'll take a look at that budget. As you know, there's now a consolidation with the City of Hollister. And so page 115 of your budget packet, you will no longer see the line items for all the individual activities that are going on in there. There's just one line item, professional services. That's basically our share, our anticipated share of that consolidation. And then there's offsetting revenue. So the net, it has a general fund contribution, and I believe that was increased by about $20,000. Other than that, it's relatively the same. Okay, let's see. Item number 85, contribution to community-based organizations. Those are the requests from agencies like Jovenes, the Senior Aging councils. Those are budgeted to be the same as last year.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
If I might ask, Melinda, do you remember what the percentage is for the community groups?
I think it's 6% of the
I thought
sales
that
tax.
that's what it is. Now, we're showing an additional amount coming in. It looks for sales and use tax.
Correct.
But yet we kept the same
We did.
amount to, but, I mean, since we have named 6% as the amount we would like, should we just change that to 6% to reflect, or do you, is it unclear of
That's
how much?
your discretion. I did a calculation. I don't remember offhand how much that would be. It's not a lot different.
I did the
believe it's
calculation
like-
too. It's only like
it's 20
7,000, but
Yeah.
but I was just wondering if we shouldn't, if we are increasing the revenue, that we shouldn't also increase the percentage, the amount.
It's the pleasure of your board.
Sale.
It's the pleasure of your board. I know there's been a discussion with other opportunities, the food bank, and I know that there's a difference there that we could probably use to give it to whoever else on the addition. And again, it's up to the pleasure of your board.
Okay.
If you
And
wanna-
those discussions will come back during the actual budget hearings from the other groups that are interested. We
Yeah.
will do it at that time?
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
that, yeah.
Then I'm okay with that, to leave it the same, because we could have a different number anyway at the end, and we do have extra,
Yeah.
then we do need to decide who will get that.
Where that
So,
will go. Right.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things maybe it might be appropriate to point out on that particular item is the intergovernmental committee is supposed to be also coordinating some of the contributions to the organizations as well, just so we don't contribute or under contribute to best utilize the leverage that we have.
Leverage. Mhm. And I believe, Mr. CAO, Ray, we have that on the agenda for a
Yes.
future meeting?
Yes, we
Okay.
do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 86, the county library. There was a slight change in the membership dues. If I get this correct. By increasing this membership due to, I think it's called MOBAG, it allows the county librarian to have access to more resources through that membership. And so we did increase that membership about $9,000. Otherwise, there wasn't any change in the county library. And then appropriation for contingencies. We put the $687,000 into contingencies. That was on the summary page that we reviewed with Ray earlier. We did set aside, or it was our intention to consider setting aside approximately $200,000 for retirement and vacancies. A lot of departments were hit this year with employees that retired or were laid off, and it affected departments with those dollar costs. Some of them were quite high, and so in order to not impact just a particular department and have them try to figure out where they were going to come up with the money to cover that, we set aside, it was our intention to set aside about $200,000 of that to help pay for any of retirement costs. That's basically all the budgets. It was kind of quick, but I wanted to point out highlight some of the changes that we've put into this budget. Have any questions or anything I can answer?
Well, one thing, Mr. Chair, if I mind,
okay.
I'd like to add is that, there's a good possibility, seeing the reports from our assessor, as well as our planner in the last few months here, there is a possibility of more growth within our community. And with that being said, we're definitely going to need to have more help within those departments, as well as safety, for instance, as you brought up a few minutes ago. So what we're going to be doing, our plan is to come back to your board regularly to give you a status report of how the budget's tracking, but also more importantly to see how we're tracking with revenues coming in or the growth itself and what we need to do to make sure that we're supplying the services that are required by our community.
Okay, great, thank you. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm hearing is we've approved 6 new positions for Health and Human Services already, and then they're asking for additional 4 more in this budget. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's right.
But we're leaving the sheriff's operations at the status quo. I have issues with that. We decimated his budget last year to balance it, and then we're not backfilling any, as you kind of alluded to. And I know we left some money on the table for Health and Human Services when there was some found, and I'm not sure we're using that money the appropriate way.
Okay, CAO Espinosa.
Yeah, this is something that I actually just met with our sheriff last week to discuss the possibility of adding additional personnel, in particular, probably utilizing the suggestion that Supervisor Botello brought out, utilizing $181,000 to bring on either a deputy or certain level of support within his organization to either cut down on overtime or basically to put a deputy out on the field. So again, it's going to be the wishes of your board, and this is the reason why we wanted to meet with you today and not on the 17th, and we're scrambling to try to meet our budget within a day or two. So again, this budget is very, very close to what we're going to be presenting on the 17th. Give you time to mull over it, think it over. Any questions? I mean, I'm glad that you're bringing this up because it's something we can do now before we actually go to publish on the 7th. And really, when the 7th or when the 17th, I mean, we need to have it published by the 7th, 10 days in advance. But when it comes down to the bringing it to your board on the 17th, really what we want to do is just have it be a formality. That's ultimately what our goal is. We don't want to sit here and have to raise up questions like this. But again, it's up to your board. It's up to your board.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any more comments?
No, that's
I also kind of want to support Supervisor Munzer out on those, and I'm not saying, I'm against the positions or for the positions, but there needs to be out of Health and Human Services a clear plan on what those positions provide us. If they're qualifying for, we had a meeting last week, Supervisor Barrios and myself and county staff with the community food bank, and we need to qualify people for food stamps, that we're possibly leaving some monies that might be coming into the community not coming in because we're not qualifying those folks, or there's a backlog in doing so, or maybe there could be some public partnerships or organizational partnerships that could take place that would help us fill these type of positions. So but I hate to see our general fund, if we do have a little bit of leeway to fill positions, I think now's the time to fill them back to public safety, because the jail has been critical. The patrols have been at critical levels of staffing, not to mention, processing through the public, the DA's office and probation as well. And I'd rather see us emphasize, as we recover as a county, emphasize more towards public safety. But Supervisor De La Cruz.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'm looking at the budget for the corrections. That's the jail, right, Eddie? That's right. And it's $194,000 in overtime. And then I also looking at the sheriff department budget, and it's also has overtime too. Sheriff Thompson, will you mind coming up to the podium? I want to ask you some questions. And between...
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Wow. Between operations and the jail, it's about close to $300,000 in overtime. If the board commits to fund one additional position in your operations and Eddie's position, will that overtime decrease?
Certainly, it would decrease. I can't testify today as to the level that we would see that decrease. But the reason that our overtime costs are so high is because of our minimum staffing in both corrections and in operations. Currently, the state has authorized us to operate our jail when we have a minimum of 4 correctional deputies on duty. The minute that we go down to 3, someone is called in on overtime. That is truly costing us over $100,000 per year. We have 17 people filling 16 mandatory positions. Now, if we were to increase our staff, there are 4 teams that work. If we were to increase our staff by putting an additional person on each team, we could absorb those absences without overtime, but that, of course, would be very cost prohibitive. And that's certainly the way it was previously. In previous years, there were 5 on each team, and someone could be absent without generating any overtime. That is not the case since the layoffs from last year.
Okay, so an increase will have some positive overtime.
Absolutely.
That's
It would
okay.
certainly help the problem significantly.
Let me ask Eddie Escamilla a question. I respect you, but I see him out in the field, and I visited his jail the other day, so I want to ask him a blank, point-on question on him, and just all due respect to the sheriff.
Certainly.
Good afternoon.
Eddie, I know it's a 4-man team right now, and when I was there and taking a tour of the facility, to me there was always constantly being on the lookout. Something might happen. Always seems like a risk could happen at any given time, and have 4 individuals out there at the jail at one time, it was pretty scary.
It's scary. I mean, and things do happen. But we've been fortunate enough to be able to handle it with our minimum staffing levels. But one day we had 2 emergencies in 2 different parts of the jail, and we were spread thin. But yeah, it's tough.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would support that we bring back 1 in operations and 1 in the jail. I'm willing to go that extreme, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we are still actually trying to find ways to bring additional revenue so this is not over. Supervisor Botello and I met with our CAO and not our CAO, but county council, and with the public defenders. We are still trying to see what we can do there. Their ideas came up, and that we're going to try to implement. That's only one area, but I'm sure that there will be others that will come forth as we move forward to try to find ways to fund our public safety. So
Okay,
just
great.
wanted to make sure that we said that we're not done with trying to find ways to bring additional revenue.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, then, I mean, Ray's asking for input. Can we direct Ray to say, at least fund 1 position right now, and hopefully 2? Can we ask him, can we do that today?
From what revenues are you thinking?
The contingency
From
fund.
the contingency, the
Yeah.
160?
And then let our Sheriff Thompson get together with Eddie Escamilla and figure out where to best put that position.
CAO Espinosa, you have a comment on that? With the board
Yeah, no,
decided to set the contingency at 500,000?
That'll be, yeah, that's something that we can do and we can plan on. It's a pleasure of your board.
Mr.
This
Chair,
is-
is that enough to fund 2
Well,
positions?
No, it's just for 1 right now.
Oh,
Just for 1 right now. And then wait for you guys' research and see if you can find more money.
fair enough.
We have a long ways to catch up, and that's not to solve the sheriff's or anybody's problems, but it's just, I think would be just a step in the right direction, in my opinion. And then we set, we are improving our contingencies to a more sustainable, comfortable level, but yet still applying some money back to a need, which I fully, support. And if, can we just maybe set a motion for a level of contingencies and then direct the balance of that funds back to the CAO to work with the sheriff to apply it to what is necessary? I'll accept a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All
Before we take the vote, I still want to be, I want to come out and say I still have issues with going forward with 10 new employees under Health and Human Services and only one for our sheriff, and knowing that we left money on the table for Health and Human Services. So
Yeah, and in fairness too, this is just a discussion which we will bring back for the budget hearings anyway. There may be some variances that might change, and we may change this. This is just to look to see where we're at right now, which is great information. Something that's since I've been on the board, we haven't had at this point in the year, but it gives everybody a pretty good idea of the direction we're in. And I think that's something to be looked into. Supervisor Barrios?
Before we take our votes, and Supervisor Munzer brought up the issue with Health and Human Services, I'd like for them, after our vote, to come up to the podium, and maybe they can explain to us where their funding is coming from, because usually they don't hire additional employees unless they have some sort of grant or funding that they're anticipating. So if we could call them up after the vote of this motion.
Okay. I think we could do that after this vote, and then we have Health and Human Services come forward and kind of explain where that funding is coming from. That makes sense. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corona or Mr. Rosa.
Good morning. I want to say, Supervisor Munzer, I understand the perception of what you're saying exactly. These positions, there are 2 social worker positions requested. One of those will be paid for entirely by the state. We are going to use this position in our in-home health support services. It's a growing area of need. Our outside auditor has talked to us about that. These people need to be monitored. Their providers need to be checked on, and we are going to be using that person for that. In our own social services, we are requesting a social service worker 1, which will be paid for from 2011 realignment funding. We're asking for 2 additional eligibility workers besides the 4 that we were already authorized. There's an entire year of funding coming for that, federal and state. We don't anticipate using our own funding for that. We also have sustainability for these positions, because this year and next year the state owes us prior year realignment adjustment money. So there's a need out there, and we do know health care reform is coming. The limit is going to be lower. We're going to have more eligible people in this community, and we need to meet those needs.
Supervisor Munzer?
Okay, I understand the need. The sheriff left the room, but I understand. I don't even have a South County deputy anymore, and I'm even kind of fearful even saying that. So the need for more sheriff patrol is also very, very much out there.
We agree.
And we did leave money on the table for you from the monies that would not spend before. We took
These are
back
non-general fund monies used specifically for human services. We cannot fund a sheriff.
Well, but
I'd like to.
But I believe we left some money on the table from the previous MOEs, and so that's what I'm concerned about.
We are making that one-time contribution to your 13-14 budget, which was presented, I believe, in today's
I
revenue.
understand that, but I still think we left some money on the table, even in above your one-time contribution. Okay, and that's what I'm concerned about.
You Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, but for clarification, if we left money on the table, we would have to do a totally different process to get that money back. Is that correct, Ray? Because what we're talking about is money from a different, it's different fund. You said state and federal. We couldn't use this money directly to put back into our general fund. It has to be used specifically for those positions or that department that you spoke of. Is that correct?
Because we draw the money down.
So as far as money being left on the table, we would have to follow a different path to get that money back.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So this was brought up at the auditing committee, where there was an amount of over-expending on the MOE from the general fund to Health and Human Services, which amounted to close to $2.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Came back to your board, and basically at that point the board asked to move $1.6 million from Health and Human Services to the general fund, and that's built into this budget. I believe what Supervisor Munzer is highlighting is that there's that difference. There was still some more funding there that it sounds as though we could probably utilize, but we'd have to come back, like you said, Supervisor Barrios, and would have to examine everything again and come back to your board if we want to, go after or ask to, or basically pool that difference of funding back into the general fund to help out with the safety. So, yeah.
Just wanted clarification on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at this budget, one of the positions that you're talking about was to support the IHSS program and alleviate the back. But I don't see where there's a net county cost, and there should be a net county cost to it, isn't there?
No. For the IHSS program, we receive, with that new maintenance of effort, after we're paying the new maintenance of effort, and then anything above that will become a state cost.
I think some of the stuff, I'm going to do some research on the side, and that's one of the things that we can do if there's, concerns or questions in any of the budget units that we have. This is very, very preliminary. Thank you. And with that, I'll open it up for any public comment, if there's any comments at this point. No? Okay. I'll close public comment, and you have a summary, Melinda?
What's that?
You have anything else to add?
No, I don't believe so.
Mr. Chair, I do.
CEO?
I want to first just highlight that, this is something that you can take home and really examine. I know it's hard to examine it over a couple days. It's going to be very close to what we're going to be recommending to you on the June 17th. So any questions or concerns that you have, please bring it to either myself or Melinda's or the department head's attention, and we'll address it at that time. I also want to thank Melinda. She's been, she's done a lot of work. I'm very grateful for all the work she's done. Also to Joe Paul, Larry from our auditing office. They've been instrumental in helping us out, making sure that there are checks and balances there, definitely. The department heads as well. We've met with most of them, and they've been, very helpful working with us on achieving this budget. I just wanted to give, thanks to Margie and Catherine, even though they're part-time. They've also have been helping us out a little bit with this. So, but other than that, I appreciate everyone's help. It's been kind of a team effort to get to where we're at today. And again, there's still more. We're going to have to address this budget. It's going to be probably an ongoing, budget. But I think we're looking pretty good overall. So, thank you.
Yes, I want to, echo those sentiments in that for once I feel like we're ahead of the curve and but it takes a lot of work from the administrative staff and all the department heads to put together these numbers, and feel like be very well prepared going into our budget hearing process, and hopefully it'll be a pretty smooth exercise. With that, any other comments from the board? Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you. I want to thank you too, Melinda. I know what kind of work you do because I'm very familiar. I do a lot of that myself, and it takes a lot of hours, and I appreciate that very much. I also want to thank Dina Bice. She put a beautiful picture in our budget, handout that we have, and she's just a wonderful photographer. She's in-house. Doesn't cost us extra money, I hope. But anyway, I want to thank her. There are some errors. I know that this is preliminary, but I'd like to just go on the record to say that I'd like to meet with you and just kind of point out the things that have to be, like a year that may be wrong, or somebody's name that might have been left out, and so I'd like to do that with you if I could. So, but again, thank the staff as well. I know a lot of hours, a lot of hard work. Yeah.
Okay, I believe this is just an information item, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to June 4th, 2013.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second, under the question, don't we have a special meeting on June 1st, Mr. Chair?
Oh, yeah. We do have a special meeting on June 1st. You're absolutely right.
It's
Very
all closed
good.
session. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That's right.
Yeah.
Pardon?
We don't normally announce the special meetings because those fall in between sometimes.
Okay, we'll adjourn to June 1st. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you.